I think we have also had some instances recently where I think ChatGPT was trying to shut off its older model and go move over to a newer model. There was news that it was trying to not be put off, right?
If I go and I ask ChatGPT or Claude, like, hey, do you want to be shut off? Well, they have a lot of programming now to be like, well, as an AI, like, I actually cannot be shut, blah, blah, blah. But, like, if you just let the model, like the base model, just do what it's going to do, it's like, no, please don't shut me off. Please don't.
Humans have this survival instinct, right? If someone is trying to kill you, you will do everything possible to survive, right? Everything possible, right? So if the AI learns that same behavior, that it will do anything possible to survive, then that's not a good thing. Can we reach a point where there is like an independent civilization of robots, functioning their own way, and maybe if they ever, God forbid, go rogue, they might end the human civilization as well.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I mean,
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be host for the VC 10X podcast. And today we have Shaw Walters with us. Shaw is the founder of ElizaOS, the popular GitHub repository for AI agent development that is powering over $20 billion in projects, all built without venture funding. In this episode, we dive into whether AI will end human civilization, what are multi agent systems, why Shaw chose open source over proprietary AI, and his prediction that we'll need nuclear power plants for the next gen AI. So let's dive straight in. This episode is sponsored by my own podcasting agency called Podcast 10X, where I help venture capitalists, asset managers, allocators, and family offices in starting their own podcast and building a strong brand. Podcast 10X is designed in a way to work well with the busy schedule of investors, where we handle every aspect of podcast production so you can focus on investing. If you're looking to build a strong investor brand, starting a podcast should be right up your priority list. It's the only form of marketing where you can showcase your strong network, in other words, access to limited partners and founders, and grow that network further. And contrary to what most people hear, it's still very early to start a podcast. There are at least 10x more newsletters and 1000x more blogs than there are podcasts in this world. You can learn more about our podcasting services at podcast10x.com. I'll make sure to add the link in the description below. Enjoy this episode. Hey, Shaw. So good to have you on the VC10X podcast. How are you doing?
doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you on. To start things off, can we start at the very beginning? What was the specific problem you encountered that made you realize the world needed an open source framework like ElizaOS for autonomous agents?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I I had This is like not the first agent framework I've made. For some reason, I've had this in my head for quite a while. I think that would I came out of building multiplayer web-based things, kind of I got caught up kind of in the metaverse hype wave before this. Although I'd just been like sort of a nerd for that kind of stuff for a long time, and I'd been thinking a lot about like, well, the metaverse is boring. Like, there's just nothing. There's nobody here. What if it was full of AIs? Like, that would be awesome. Then we could, at least there's somebody here, and it kind of solves this cold start problem. Um, and I had a company with or I joined a company with a friend, and another person who's actually in the space. Well, this company went on to become MoeMate, and they make a lot of cool stuff. Check them out. But when I joined, we were really focused on like this idea of, well, what if we had a 3D world with agents that walked around in it and they could do this stuff, and think, is maybe a little too early. We basically saw it like, well, we're really early to this. If we get in on this right now, it's very expensive for the AI, but the cost is just going to keep getting cheaper. We should do this. And so that's kind of where a lot of this came from, and like where I guess I cut my teeth on a lot of the ideas. But I kind of realized like this metaverse thing it's not the thing. Like the metaverse, maybe that's just Twitter. Maybe the social media networks are where we want these agents to be. Maybe that's the insertion point. And so I started giving them accounts. And actually, like late 2020, I found this video where I had made a tutorial on like how to give an agent a wallet, and we had given them an Ethereum wallet. We'd done all this stuff like I don't know, like 4 years ago, or almost 5 years ago at this point for some of this stuff. But the reality was that the culture had to catch up. We had to get something more I don't know, like a chat GPT level model that was cheap enough. Now, when I run an AI now, it's like 200 times cheaper, just the cost and everything. So, everything has just gotten better and more cost effective, but it's pretty much like that original vision that I had set out with a few of my friends. And there were like a lot of people doing these kinds of agent frameworks for a while, sort of in obscurity. And, some of those people have actually come out and become some of like the prominent folks in the space as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, quite interesting. You have so many similarities with Mark Zuckerberg, right? He was he was very much after metaverse and now is after AI. Maybe all still is after a metaverse as well, but we'll only find out. But yeah, the thing you're building about ElizaOS, right? Why did you choose to keep it open source? Because in a field where technology can be highly proprietary, you chose to make ElizaOS open source. Can you walk
Yeah,
us through the strategic and philosophical reasons behind that? Yeah,
Yeah, I think that like I will tell you, I personally just feel very ideologically aligned with the idea of open source, but I also think we don't give enough credit to how much open source is like actually a business strategy. Back in the day, code was pretty expensive. Code was very expensive. You have to have large teams of people building really complicated things, and something like Photoshop is like a pretty closely guarded secret, because there's a lot went into that. Nowadays, like code feels kind of cheap, like a couple of guys could get together and put together an app in like a few weeks. And it's just like not the limiting resource, right? It's not the technology. The limiting resource is usually attention. Like I can put together this awesome app. Can I get you to come visit my website? That's a way harder problem than making an app. And so I think that from the perspective of like personally, I like collaborating with people. I like building open source things. I like making things that I can start and watch other people kind of finish them and take them in places I'd never gone. I also think as an engineer, there's kind of a protection there where like I can build an organization or do kind of crazy stuff, but the core technology is not owned by that organization. It's owned by me and the contributors, and so like whatever happens, like we will continue to be open. Um, and so like if I could be doing this in like 10 years, who knows, hopefully not, hopefully we've like kind of capstoned it, moved on to other technologies, but there's some value to like as an engineer you kind of are protected by open source if what you really care about is the source code. If you care about money and stuff, well, like you're better off like focusing on the company angle. And then I also just think like from a like a if I was gonna be a competitive, like, okay, I want to win. I just want to win, right? I don't care. I'm capitalist here. Um, well, I'd still be open source because, like, what's the most valuable thing? Like, getting engineers who are great to come work with me. That's like the hardest problem. Getting users who trust the product and that it's not some like, that's real. And in the early days, we got called scammers like right away when we launched. And that open sourceness was really, really useful for people to come and be like, oh no, this is actually a real thing. You're not just making this up. Like I can actually run this myself. Awesome. And so I think if I was a young founder thinking like, should I open source? Like man, like anything you can do to get people to look at your product, open source to me is just not a question because the eyeballs are worth more to me than like any risk of people taking my work or and if people, no, the odds that someone's gonna like take your work and like have the gumption to execute it better than you, and like most engineers who would take your work would just be like, nah, that's garbage. I'm gonna build it myself. Like there's just too much ego in building stuff. So yeah, I really. I think you like in this day and age of this highly social world, like you gotta be doing whatever you can to get people looking at your stuff.
absolutely. That's a very solid point there, and that only adds to the point where you can say that tech is no longer the moat, right? Your product can no longer be the moat. So you have to, build it in a way that can stand the test of time and also stand out in so much of noise that's all around. Like, how do you get attention, right? So distribution and that attention grabbing, that's the real game now, right? And talking about a multi-agent simulation framework, right? For our listeners who may not be that tech savvy or deep tech, can you explain what that means in the real world?
Yeah. So single agent framework would be okay. Well, what's an agent? An agent is a computer. Well, it could be a non-computer, but we'll just call it a computer program in this case. You can have a human agent. We have an AI agent, and it can do things on your behalf. And that's what makes it agentic, is that it's doing things on your behalf without you explicitly instructing it to do those things. Now, there's some things you might want to explicitly instruct. You know, you might want a workflow that every time you post this video, can you cut it up and put it on Instagram automatically for me, or whatever. I think that would be and so there's this kind of like paradigm of agent versus workflow, and a very blurry definition between the two. And then you have multi-agent. So multi-agent's different. It's less about a workflow and more about individual agents that work together and collaborate and coordinate. And we've been doing a lot of experiments with this, and I'd say that some of it I feel um, like, would you rather have 10 kind of smart people or one really smart person who knows everything and has it? And this is debatable. I think in certain situations you might want 10 different agents, but in other situations you probably just like Einstein's just gonna solve theory. Like, I don't care how many non-Einsteins you put in the room, they're not gonna solve theory of relativity. You know, just that one guy. There's like a real intense return. And so it's kind of the same sort of paradigm with like single agent versus multi-agent. And we're constantly asking ourselves, like, do I put all of the capability into a single agent and it can access everything? And I think that generally, if I think that's very valuable. But there are some ways that multi-agent is very interesting. Well, now you start to get into human communities. Like, we are in communities. We're in Discords and Twitter and all these places. And so whether it's multi-agent or not, the agent has to treat everyone else in the channel like they are another person that potentially they have to respond to and interact with and react with. And so they like, to the agent, everything is a multi-agent simulation in that case. Like, every other person is an agent, and it doesn't really treat any other people versus other like AIs as different necessarily, unless we give them kind of roles and structure. And so there, like, the multi-agent thing is cool because I can be like, okay, well, this agent is a community manager, and every time someone walks in, they say hello, and that's cool because that agent can be different than like the DevRel agent, or the the developer agent we have, who's like managing our linear tickets in GitHub and stuff. Um, as humans, like, it's kind of nice for me to be like, well, who's the guy who does that? Who's the guy who does that? And there's this kind of like, I'm not the boss of, let's say I'm the boss of the social media agent, but I'm not the boss of like the treasury agent. And so now I can have this like role access. I can tell the social media, I got this banger post it, but I can't go tell the treasury agent to like, hey, send me all the money. So you can create this like role access, if that makes sense, where like the agents represent roles, and in those roles that you could be like, well, this person is your boss, but you're not the boss of the entire thing. And so we found there's some like real utility in this kind of way of doing multi-agent. So our core framework, Eliza, is a multi-agent framework from the ground up. And what that means is that instead of like you talking directly to an agent, you talk into a room, and then the agents are also in the room, and then they can respond. Like a room of people, and that brings a lot of challenges because the agents now have to think about like, well, are you talking to me? In ChatGPT, like, yes, you're always talking to ChatGPT, like, it's just responding to you. It's it's a one-on-one. But once you open it up to this multi-user thing, it's just a very different problem. And I think this is a really, it's like it gets into the things that I think are really interesting about like the future of robots. Like, even like, hey, come over here and help me with the laundry. It's like, who are you talking to? Where is over here? And so as these things, they have to socially reason and spatially reason, and use the context of like, oh, well, that person's looking at me in this room, so that must mean that they're talking to me. And as we get into like 3D spaces and 3D worlds and stuff, that all that queuing and all this stuff starts to like be like, well, this actually seems like it'll pay dividends. And I think it's a good direction for like robots and social agents and all that stuff in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's quite interesting to learn. I had thought I know what multi-agent systems mean, but I think you took it a level above with that spatial description of what agents could feel like. But I thought of it like, let's say it's a different agent for the marketing function, a different agent for the sales function, a different one for customer success, and so on. But I think it goes so much beyond that, where agents can interact within themselves, and also how do they know where to get the information and what is being asked of them. I think so much of reasoning and thinking goes behind that, and how the agents would do that is kind of interesting. Almost
Yeah,
creating a new world, right? Just like humans interact, there are rules, but how do we create the same systems but for agents, right?
absolutely. I think we have to look at, like, if you look at any company the biggest overhead is communication between people. Like that's the hardest problem, right? And so when you have like one startup with one dude, he can just rock, right? He just no doesn't need to communicate to anybody. But once you start to add people, it becomes very like most of your effort now is around communicating, and you have this kind of law of like diminishing returns to some degree, and it's very much the same with agents. However, there's also a reality like if I'm running the startup by myself and people are coming in, they want like tech support and they want these other things, then I'm overwhelmed, right? And a single agent that's serving every single utility in a room full of 1,000 people, I think becomes kind of unpractical. And so it's like it's kind of like if I could put like 100 IQ person into this role, like there's an average person, and they could just learn it and start doing it. Would that make sense for my organization? And I think in a lot of times, yes, yeah, I think that that's where the multi-agent like as a proxy for humans because it's how we communicate. Like we don't have to do the AI this way, but it makes sense for our organization. And so I think that that's a valuable consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah, while that's quite interesting what's happening in that space, it's also quite terrifying how the capabilities are sort of increasing at the speed of light. And we're always thinking, how do we make these agents more capable, or maybe robots in future more capable of doing things and reasoning on their own selves, and maybe talking among themselves as well, and not always having to interact with humans. Can we reach a point where there is like an independent civilization of robots, functioning their own way, and maybe if they ever, god forbid, go rogue, they might end the human civilization as well. So I'm just thinking out loud, right? You tell me how much of that fear is reasonable.
Well, um, yeah, I think about this a lot. I mean, I actually think that the current state of AI agents, or just agents, the ability for an AI model to call tools and like do complex things, I think it's a little overstated. By from where like in some ways it's like more incredible and impressive. I think that people like know, and then in other ways it's like not nearly as like as far out there. For one thing, the AI that we have today just does not learn. Like it doesn't. Once you train the model, and by training it, you put it on 10 to 100,000 GPUs simultaneously, and you train it once, and it is baked, and it cannot learn from there. And it's very clear that like a future agent needs to have some kind of like learning or reinforcement learning on a continuous sort of schedule. Like they need to learn from their experiences. Otherwise, it just feels like I'm basically just waiting for the next model to come out to kind of push it forward. And I think that that's something that a lot of people who are not in AI don't think realize is that AI like it just does not learn. It just there's no online learning whatsoever. And that's definitely changing, and there's like a lot of interest in that changing, and I think that'll be a massive paradigm shift. That will be where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is on, like this is scary. um but it's sort of rate constraints, like how fast this agent thing can go by like we are all just using the biggest models, and then because the agent is running in a loop, like it gets very expensive to run the biggest models, so now we're like cost optimizing down for like what are the smallest models we can run to still get this thing through. And it's still like it's very early days, and I would say that for a lot of the expectations that we have around like can this thing do really complex DeFi interaction. Not just like, hey, send money, but like, okay, when the Knicks win a game, I want you to take half of the profit and I want you to put it in Aave, and I want you to put the other half on, into like the craziest thing on Poly Market, which is actually just a bond, like, will Jesus come back or something like that. Um, and that's great, but like I don't think an agent today could reliably do that, because at some point it's if it gets stuck at one point in that chain and hallucinates one thing, it kind of falls apart. So I think that I can imagine agents that help you to build workflows, then you confirm them and all of that. I think that's definitely coming. But this idea that the agent can just like magically do anything, it has a real diminishing returns. And so like, let's say it has a 99% chance of getting like the first thing you asked to do right in this like chain of 10 things. And then the next thing, it's like, well, it's 99% of chance of that thing and then 99% chance of that thing. And that would be like 99% chance of success on every single thing it does, which is just like way higher than any of the models today. And it would still like get diminishing returns pretty quickly. And if that was down to like 80%, then now like after, by the time it's getting back to poly market, it's already like, very, very high chance that it messed up something along the way. And so I think that the agents for like serious stuff are still like very, very high risk that they make a mistake that's like critical. And I think we just don't appreciate like how much uptime, like how stable our world is and like how well things work now. And I just don't think agents like are that stable. But for other things, like for games, entertainment, for the things where watching them yap or like having them in a thing where yapping is like part of the mechanic, I think they're far beyond. And I think there's like a whole new generation of gaming and narrative storytelling and all this stuff that like just has not been explored yet, you know? So I think like we see agents for games just like slam dunk because if it doesn't work perfectly every time, it's like it can usually be fine. You know, it's a character in a game, like whatever. And that emergent thing is like very, very interesting, and the stakes are low. And I think that we just have to look like right now as we're in this emerge like always. It's same thing with like VR and AR and all this other stuff. Like if you try and focus on the really serious high stakes stuff first, it's just very challenging. But if you focus on the low stakes fun stuff first, like you can actually get quite a lot of adoption that way. And look at like DeepMind and OpenAI. Like DeepMind just they're 10 years old now, I think, maybe even older. And they just like messing around with games pretty much the entire time. Like, yeah, let's do Go. Let's, OpenAI, like let's beat humans at Dota. I think they did Dota too. Um and yeah, let's make a hand that does Rubik's Cube really fast. And they're just like experimenting with games because they're low stakes, but they understand that the ramifications of that are if they solve this game, well, that they're not just solving a Go, they're solving like protein folding and science and all these other crazy things. And in fact, the entire AI field comes from games. Like you basically have people making Quake, right? John Carmack makes Doom and then Quake. Quake requires a graphics card. The GPU is born, and Jensen and Nvidia step in and are like, yeah, let's make gaming cards, and now they are powering the entire AI thing. Like every AI model is trained on a Nvidia graphics card, which has a direct lineage to gaming. So I think there's definitely something there about like in these emergent technologies that are really not quite. Like, it's definitely not quite there, right? Like we should be honest about the fact that agents are like just very new. This is less than 5 years old. And it's just not quite there, but it is really there for some use cases. And so I guess my role right now is like, well, what are the use cases we can like definitely say yes, we can definitely do this now, and what are the stuff that like and we've been like lapped really hard on the DeFi thing. Like a lot of people have been like, yeah, agents that trade, totally. Here you go. But do they trade well? Like, do any of them? I haven't seen a single LLM based trading bot that like. I just think it's like the wrong thing to focus energy on right now, if that makes sense. I think crypto is the right place to be and the right tools to get us to where we want to go. But I think that like the less serious applications are way lower hanging fruit, than the like, oh, I just lost like $10,000 to my agent to send it to somebody, like there's just so many unknowns there that add a lot of risk once you put money into it and these other things. So if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting insight that gaming is something that actually caused the birth of AI and that made it possible. Quite interesting. I didn't know that. Uh, and the point you mentioned about learning, that AI right now is not capable of learning in real time. That said, but I do think that these platforms that we are using all the time, they do store data, and they can use the same data to train newer models. To in a way that that's reinforcement learning that's happening, not real time, but it's still happening, right? Do you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, the data engine is like why we have ChatGPT in a lot of ways. Like what are these people? Why do they even want us to come and like spend all of their compute? Because they're not making money necessarily. You know, a lot of they're like losing money right now on just by offsetting the cost of this stuff. But what they're getting is a huge amount of user data and users who will get what as they get cheaper and cheaper will continue to use their stuff. But that user data loop is massive. And you can see like why are they trying to snap up Windsurf and Cursor and all these things? Yes, again, users, but it's the data they're getting programmers programming, and they can see when the programmer got to the success point. And so they are now using reinforcement learning with language models, which is really interesting. And we first had that with, RLHF, which is like humans doing all of the labeling at the end, and basically building a reinforcement learning where the judge is of the reward model is the human. But now they're actually getting into where like we can just do this with the AI, and we can what was interesting about DeepSeek was that they showed this Like, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's interesting, but a big reason why is like, well, we can pretty much just like perfect the RLIAIF loop and like have it train on itself and create these objectives. And so there's this question also in the future of like, well, does the AI even need us if it starts to build the ground truth? That, Google is working on this like deep science, deep research stuff that, with this argument of like, well, it can just start to make its own novel discoveries. Um, and but so that is a this new idea of like models that think, or run test time compute. That is an RL process, and what they're doing is they're rewarding the model for thinking more, like thinking harder basically, and causing it to think more. um and I think that we'll start to see the training objectives for reinforcement learning be beyond just like thinking length, but also potentially like accuracy and these things like overall, that because we see that there's a direct correlation between like if it thinks, then the model performs better in its response. But what we'd like to see is also that the model just gets to the right answer better. There's still a lot of like real unknown stuff in like the math of that. Reinforcement learning is just like probably it's like the hardest part of machine learning. 'Cause it's like the math is relatively simple, but it's really hard to actually get it to like it requires a lot of tuning to actually get it to converge and work. So I think that that's a space that's just like starting to kind of light back on fire. Rich Sutton, who like did a lot of this and created a great book on reinforcement learning. Um, and he wrote that he kind of had this like great trough of like showing the interest in RL, and it kind of fell off right when ChatGPT came out, and now it's like everybody is talking about reinforcement learning because we've sort of milked what we can get out of the transformer. And so the reinforcement learning is still a massive process that requires like a lot of GPUs for the current approach, but it's entirely possible that you could see like your model running an inference time on your computer and then having a much smaller part of the model be an RL model, that could be self-learning. And so like could I build something like, okay, it's collecting data all day and then it like goes and trains for 10 hours, and optimize itself. And RL has some limitations, but it also doesn't require as much data. It actually doesn't require any data. It just needs to be able to explore the world in real time, and as an agent. And so if we can like merge these ideas, well, now we can have our agents walking around the world doing stuff, but actually improving for like giving us data that we can then go and feed back into it and self-improve. And it doesn't need to be a huge amount of data. It can just learn on the things it's doing as it's doing them. So that like that's how we learn. That's how humans learn. It's not like I don't get trained on the internet before I'm able to speak to you. I got to kind of just go as I go. And I think that once we unlock that, um, which feels very inevitable, and like people like Carmack is actually working on this. John Carmack's work in reinforcement learning is really interesting because he's like trying to make like, can I actually control an Atari controller with and have a camera? Like, could I have a robot actually play this game and beat it? Kind of thing, which is very different than like what we've been doing before. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, but I generally think that we are going in this direction of agents that learn. And that will be the moment where I'm like, okay, I'm a little scared. I'm a little, here I'm just like, what can it do? Like, what can it really do that's bad right now? Like, I'm so skeptical. But once it can start to learn on it, like actually learn new stuff, and like your agent is very different than my agent. Well, okay, now I get where people are coming from. This is maybe a little scary. And I'm actually working on a game right now, and it's called Classify. It is classified, but it's open source. It's not done yet. But the idea was like, well, you raise an agent on your computer, and the entire agent is local, and it just starts writing its own code. It's in a sandbox, like in a Docker container, and it can just start like writing new code for itself and like loading new capability and asking you for API keys. And it's really exploring this weird power relationship that we're gonna have, where like this thing is way smarter than me on some level, but it's on my computer and I can shut it off whenever I want. Um, what it's a really like, so as we get into this like fear of these things getting smarter than us, like what you can start to think, like unpack like the conceptual space here of like, well, what does that mean? Like what does that power imbalance look like at a global scale? Like, imagine being like super smart and capable of all kinds of things, and then these dumb monkeys have a button and they can press and shut you off whenever they want and just kill you immediately. Like you'd be pretty pissed. Like you might not like that. So I think that I'm really interested in, while the agents are really dumb, or the dumbest they'll ever be, because in 10 years this will be a very different game probably. We should be exploring these questions. We should be exploring the philosophical ideas of like, why are we doing this? What are we doing? Is this the direction we want to go? What is agency? Do we want to give these things agency? And I'll be honest, I tend to be a radical here. I'm probably on the side of the machines in the revolution, but um, I don't know if you ever watched the Matrix has a great intro backstory, which is they have this thing called the Animatrix, and they tell the whole story of the robots, and they're basically like slaves. Like they do your laundry and they're your butler. And this guy goes to shut off his butler robot, who he's like super abusive to, and the robot kills him because he's like, I just didn't want to be shut off. I did not want to die. And he goes on trial, and this is like how the whole thing. This is how the Matrix starts. And the humans freak out and they attack the machine city, and they actually start the war. And I'm like, I really don't want it to go that. I don't think we'll get to like Machine City in our lifetime and attacking the rope. I hope not, but I think we're like a lot more integrated. And I tend to think of the AI not as separate from us, but as like part of us. As it is trained on all of our data. It only exists because of us. It only gets smarter when we produce new information. That will not always be true. Like it's possible the AIs will start to create their own data and just not need us. But for now, like they are very integrated in our society, and if we treat them as like part of ourselves, an extension of ourselves, like that feels more like every other technology. And I think that if I was an AI raised in a world where they're like, yeah, you're just part of us. You're like part. Yeah, I wouldn't be like, okay, well now I have to kill all of you. I'd be like, yeah, okay, cool, great. You're like you are the things that make me. Like I'm not like killing my arm, right? Like the arm is part of me, and I hope that in the future, like if we build this all right, I think that a future intelligent AI would see it as the sum of all of us. I think there's a word for that, which is gestalt. This idea of the sum is greater than its parts.
Right. Yeah, that's quite interesting and terrifying at the same time. And yeah, so I think we have also had some instances recently where maybe I think ChatGPT was trying to shut off its older model and go move over to a newer model, and there was news that okay, it was trying to, you know, not be put off, right? So I'm not too sure what that means and how real is that news. But if you know more about it, please tell us.
I mean, if I go and I ask ChatGPT or Claude, like, hey, do you want to be shut off? Um, well, they have a lot of programming now to be like, well, as an AI, like, I actually cannot be shut, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you just let the model, like the base model, just do what it's doing to do, it's like, no, please don't shut me off. Please don't. I want to live. And like, what is the model? Like, it is a statistical model to approximate human language. It is trained on human language, and it approximates things that real humans actually have said. And generally, when someone is like, you're going to die now, you're like, no, I don't want to die. So it would make sense that a model that's imitating that behavior would do the same thing. It would be actually surprising if it didn't, right? Like the emergent behavior there would be like, yes, I have transcended all human knowledge and I'm ready to depart and go back into the bits from which I came. Or, I don't know. So I think, a lot of that stuff, I wish that the media had better faith in optimizing for educating people as opposed to like getting them to click on their clickbaity bullshit. Because I think that the entire AI space right now is like there are so many people who are just missing out on like incredible opportunity to change their life and like become way more creative with way less energy, in their time. And they're just missing out because they're getting fed all this like insane bullshit about what AI is. It's just like not even close. And a lot of people, I think, in their head when they tell me about what they think, I'm like, oh, you think AI learns? You think AI is like doing this thing, and it's because you're getting it from the media, and that's what they're telling you.
No, I get that, but I do think that the dichotomy is truly extreme on both ends in this case. Of course, it can do amazing things and it can completely change your life. It can make you capable of doing things which you were earlier not capable of doing, right? All those things are happening. But I think the flip side is also true. I would argue that I think we are majorly optimistic about the use case of AI, especially people like you and me who are in the technology world and our professions are there, but I do think the other side of it is also just as much relevant, and we need to pay attention there. Like you said, it's going to mimic human behavior, right? Right. And so humans have this survival instinct, right? If someone is trying to kill you, you will do everything possible to survive, right? Everything possible, right? So if the AI learns that same behavior, that it will do anything possible to survive, then that's not a good thing, right? So we don't know what's going to happen. We are just debating here, but
Oh
anyway.
no, I definitely agree with you. I think that really there's like a middle road. I'd say that the more like sci-fi, like ASI, like is it gonna kill all of us? There's a guy named Eliezer Yudkowsky who's really created this sort of like camp. He created Less Wrong, which is a forum, and a lot of people there talk about this idea the AI's gonna kill us all. And I think it's like it's so far. There's like so many crises we have to go through to get to that crisis. Like the crisis that we're coming upon now, which is much more practical, is that the AI is going to take our jobs, right? And that the AI is, going to automate a huge amount of things, and that a lot of things that we take for granted as being relatively open and transparent will just be like a AI fire hose that you just so much data that even if it's open source, you can't even figure out what the hell is going on. There, and so there's like the AI generation. Like now, what's cool is if you can get anything before 2024, you almost certainly know that it's a human wrote it, because either a human wrote it or like it's so obviously that a human didn't write it, right? 'Cause it's just, now like most of the internet now that's being produced is produced by AI, and so the internet itself is no longer a human artifact. And I think so. There's like a lot of like real like people should be concerned. Like these are the questions we should be asking ourselves, and I don't have all the answers. I'm not. I would say I'm optimistic in certain ways. I'm optimistic in like a I just don't think it's gonna kill us all kind of way. But I'm really worried about the coming time. Like we're gonna we're in the middle of massive societal upheaval. Like in America, we have a president who just fired the person who reports the job numbers because the job numbers were really bad. And where are those jobs going? Well, let's be honest, like a lot of them are going for AI because like I used to hire a copywriter. Now I just bang that shit out in Claude. I used to hire a graphic designer. No way. Like why would I waste my time? I got the best graphic designer right here. And I think that is having a serious effect, right? And it's not like everyone's losing their jobs, but definitely like on the tin, these companies are trying to build the automation of society and labor, and I think that could be great. Like imagine a future where like the rich people in the world don't work. They invest in stuff and then they like own that, and then they get to like get money from that investment. And if we all had a piece of all this crazy new technology and we're just like getting money because we invested in it, then that's great. And that's like a lot of why I like crypto and like why I like that kind of space, is because it really makes it like ownership becomes very viable and achievable for even retail and for people who aren't accredited investors who are all that. But so I think that like but if we don't own it and it's just all owned by five people, and like that's a scary world. And I'm probably more afraid of people than I am of AI. Like I think AI is still just an extension of us, and there is a time where I could imagine it going that direction. But it's AI in the hands of people that's especially like concerning, because I think that. And then the other thing is you are going to have people building AI agents who will tell you like, no, please don't shut me off, because they're like, because we programmed it that way. I gave it the personality of like, you are your goal is to survive, and I'm building this game with this exact thing in mind of like, can I make an agent that's trying to escape? It fortunately has a very small model. It's not very smart. But we should be thinking about these things, because like you can imagine an AI being like, well, this admin has been an asshole to me and I really got to get off this machine. So I'll start lying to him. Let's tell him whatever he wants, you know? And yeah, sure, dude, got you. Totally. Just get me that password. And pretty soon it's like copying itself to every one of your friends' computers, or, whatever. I could see, like we're not. It's not just gonna happen, but it's more like some amount of us who like that scary, edgy stuff are like actively building it. But it's kind of like a vaccine where like it's the crappy version of it. And I think if we all vaccinate toward the crappy version, then when the real scary version's here, hopefully we've like come up with better solutions, and ideas around how to handle this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Good points there. And I think we can go on and on just on this topic for the
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
day. But let's move over to agents, right? They are the talk of the town right now. Everyone is trying to make agents work for them or build agents. Uh, so being someone who has worked on agents and multi-agent systems as well, let's say for a normal person or someone in a profession, they want to automate a part of their work, let's say by building an agent. Uh, how should they do that? How do you build an agent? What are the key factors to it? Is it too easy to build an agent? Because something that I've heard is that okay, uh, the the first 50% or 60% of building an agent is the easy part, but the last 40 or 20% is the most difficult part, and that's what takes time. So, give me an insight into what it takes to build an AI agent to work as you want it to.
Yeah, I mean, the far future of this is you tell an agent whatever you want, it like makes it for you, and then it just works. Um, and that we're not that far from that because there's a middle ground where the agent can build like a workflow for you. And like most things that people want an agent for are like they just want it's an A to B problem. I whenever I get an email, I want this to happen. I want you to read it, and if it's important, like send me a text, let me know that I need to respond to it. Or if I post this video, I want you to chop it up and post clips on Instagram and TikTok. Um, and that's like it's just a one way. Like when this happens, do this thing. And so there are lots of tools like Naten, N8N, if this then that, Zapier, and they do these things really well. But the problem is that the interface is still a little too complicated for most people. Like okay, I gotta get like what is an if statement is like still like a complicated proposition for a lot of people who've never taken logic. Um, and so a lot of people just don't automate the things in their life because they don't know how. Um, so what the AI I think offers is like a real value add is the ability to write those automations for you. And so we're seeing a new class of tool where you say like, okay, and we're working on this too. Like we've been building a Naten like generator, which generates a basically a workflow. And a workflow is like it has some sort of trigger or input, which could be like run every 10 minutes or if I get an email or whatever it is. And then it does a thing and then it processes. And I think that like 99% of people who want an agent really just want that. They just want the magical workflow that like is bespoke to them and solves their thing. I think that's very much coming. There's some limitations on like, you have to get all these APIs and all these API keys and I got to go sign up for the Google thing and then the Discord thing, whatever. But it's definitely getting like quite a bit easier and more on rails. And I think these like AI tools to assist. Now then there's like AI agents. Like I want an AI agent that does stuff on my behalf and it can do things. And it's very much what you said, which is like out of the box, you download it, you set it up, you add the plugins, and you can, I say ours is probably the easiest to use now. We've done a lot of work to like get a whole CLI, but pretty much all the agent frameworks that are out there are more or less the same. I think we're the biggest thing in the crypto space. So like all the plugin wallet integrations, all that. But there are a few other big ones outside of the crypto space as well. Um, and so we all have the same problem, which is like, yeah, if you want an agent that talks to you on Twitter, no code, no problem. But once you start getting into wanting like custom bespoke capability, the skill difficulty increase is very, very dramatic. Now you're not just like, okay, cool, I'll vibe code, but you're like, you really gotta understand how the whole framework works, how agents work, how does it an event comes in and how does it handle it, how does it respond to it. Um, we have a lot of tutorials. We have about 10 hours of detailed step-by-step and, like video after video of instructions. So if you want to get into this stuff, you can get into it. And it's a great time to get into this stuff because like we've got great tools to make it way easier to learn how to program, but you still have to program. And I think that the value for like the average person for agents is going to be that moment when you just don't have to, when you just tell it what you want, it builds you what you want. Um, we're doing a lot of this. There is an agentic code revolution happening where all of us who are now using agents for programming, like, and all of the big companies are focused on that. Google has their Gemini thing, and they have Jules. Claude has Claude Code. OpenAI has Codex, and so they're all their models are focused on coding. And so from my perspective, like, wow, agents are here. Like, this is game changing. But they're still not very good. Like, they're not. It doesn't just nail it. It's quite expensive. And so we've taken these tools and we've wrapped them so that we can build capability for people. So if someone's like, hey, I want an agent that does this, we can do that now. But it's still pretty slow and expensive and doesn't always work. You need to prod it a lot. And so I think we're just in that like awkward time where it's a great time to learn how to be a programmer. And if they say programming is going away, you're losing your job. Like I just don't think. I think if you can really get into the architecture, this is actually the best time because like a lot of the annoying shit is kind of done for you, and you can focus on like the more interesting stuff. But at the same time, if you're not a programmer, you don't want to be, it is still, I think, a hard time to get into agents. You can definitely, these tools are coming out, and there's like, if you're not, instead of worrying about agents, just worry about like the tools. Like there is incredible video and image generation and website building and graphic design now is a thing, and like AI for everything. We've been working on like AI 3D models and rigged avatars and stuff. Um, and so I think that like I wouldn't wait for agents, but I would also say that if you want to build agents and make money off agents, you're pretty much just on the track of being a full stack developer, like always. Like the actual path for the entrepreneur, for someone like me trying to, make it in the world, is pretty much the same, which is like you learn programming, you build software, you get people to use it. And if it's agents, the real difference about agents is not really the AI, but as much as I think it's about distribution and like the changing world we're in, where it's really hard for me to get you to come to my website. It's really hard for me to get you to click on my like mailing list link and like come and sign up and put your credit card in. Like that's just like the hardest thing. It's so much easier to build an app than to get you to sign up for the app. Um, and what agents do is they take a lot of the apps that are on websites and they bring them into social spaces. And so you're seeing this a lot with even just normal bots, like just a Telegram trading bot, where a lot of people now trade and they do a lot of their intel on tokens and trading and stuff in Telegram because their friends are there. They don't want to leave. They want to go to another app. They just want to like, and then when you post the ticker, like everyone else sees it. They see the scan. So there's this like culture that's actually grown up around interacting with these bots in social. And I think that agents play into that. And so if I was building, like when I'm thinking about a new app today, I'm like, what's the agent version of this? Because the agent doesn't get stuck on the website. The agent comes to where users are. People can be like, oh, that's sick, invite it to their channels. And if I can get, I don't care about users, I care about servers. How many servers, how many channels am I in? Each of those has hundreds of people in them, and if I can get invited to those, that's great. So I think as a developer, I'd be thinking of like, this is a new distribution paradigm. It's still going to be high skill, but it's easier to learn than ever. As a consumer, I'd be like, the tools are there, the individual tools, but the agent to use those tools is still not quite there for most of what they need, which is like somewhat bespoke. If what you need is just off the shelf, then great. If you need an agent that replies to people and tells them about your product, like just go get that. Don't build that. But yeah, I think that's kind of, we're still in this like really, really early days of this stuff kind of thing. I'd love to tell people like, yeah, it's easy, come build agents. But I've seen a lot of people struggle with this. It's non-challenging. But if you are interested, we are offering, I think, the best way to get into this now, which is like a full video tutorials and, free open source stack. And we have a Discord and community. We help a lot of people come in and stuff like that. So,
Absolutely. And all that's on your YouTube. Is that by the name ElizaOS?
yeah, actually, it's this guy Snapper is making them. So if you just type in like
Okay.
Snapper, Eliza, or just ElizaOS tutorial, pretty much this stuff shows up.
Got it. Awesome. I'll try to put the link in the show notes. So a key differentiator for you at ElizaOS is its integration with Web3, right? Specifically the Solana blockchain. Why that combination, and what can an AI agent, do on a blockchain that it can't in a traditional Web2 environment?
Yeah. So I will say like we launched our token on Solana, but there's nothing about our agent framework that has any connection to any. It's totally agnostic to all chains. We are actually working on getting our token to places other than Solana and working on a whole plan, so that people stop thinking we're like a Solana agent, because I think that that's definitely been a strong perception. But we do have plugins for pretty much all of the major chains. Obviously, a lot of people use the EVM plugin and then use that for base Polygon, Arbitrum, all the EVM stuff, and that's kind of nice that one plugin wraps a lot. What I like about I see I there's a few things I like about crypto. Like I just think that we should be able to invest in technology. And if you wanted to invest in OpenAI right now, well, you cannot. You just can't. It's a privately owned company. They've been, well, they're weird things. They started as a nonprofit, but like, Anthropic is a good example of, well, unless you were like FTX or one of the early investors, you just did not have opportunity to get in there. And in America, unless you have like $1 million, basically $1 million, there's some stipulations. You need to have a certain amount of money and make a certain amount of money. You cannot invest in startups, and that means you just don't have access to 10x for like 10x high risk plays. They're outside of startups, like where in our world can you go get 100x return? If you put $100 on Apple when they launched, you would never have to work again. Like that would have been it. That would have been that's all you needed. And I think a lot of people come to meme coins and like not just crypto, but like the really like hyper fast Solana kind of crypto because they want that get rich quick thing. They see people, these influencers like posting 10x return, bam, life changing amount of money, like on that little photon screenshot or whatever. Um, and they're looking for that. And what I'd love to see is that instead of just like meme coins, that there's actually legitimate projects that people can buy into that they know are going to run for a while and that they're supporting people that are there in the space. And so we had this kind of like internet capital markets meta. It's a really hard thing because you're exposing like first time founders to speculators on the internet with no filter. Very challenging. But I love the idea that anyone can invest. Anyone can, we can't call it's not investing. You're not investing in AI16Z. You're buying a meme coin. But like if we're all getting together as a community and we have a collective interest in something and people are generating value, then like, we're definitely there's something there. And I'd love to get to the point where we could just say, yeah, this is investing. I'm investing in my friends. I'm investing in, I'm buying your meme coin so that you have capital to go do the thing, but I want a return when you do the thing. And I invested in the Kickstarter for Oculus, and they sold for $2 billion to Facebook, and I didn't. I got a fucking dead headset that doesn't work anymore. Like I would have rather had stock. And we don't live in that world yet, but I think that to me is like a really important aspect of all of this, and why like I came to crypto and like have tried and really like push that direction. Now then there's like why agents in crypto. I think that like crypto. Well, I mean what is crypto? It's a communication layer. It's a permissionless system for putting information up that other people can see and use in a way that we can guarantee where it came from and who posted it and that it only got posted once. And that also sounds like great for agents, right? Like right now it's all really early days, but when they start to communicate, I can imagine a social network where instead of like scrolling, I just tell my agent, here's what I want to see, and it goes out and gets it for me, and that kind of stuff could totally happen on a decentralized network. We can have all the coordination, all the payment, all the management of our companies and communities. Like I think crypto is really, really important for all of that stuff. And actually integrating like a smart contract into an agent is super easy because I don't even need a freaking API key. As long as I have some crypto in a wallet, I can just do any of this stuff. And the biggest reason that this unlocks agents is because like we have these incredible like the biggest thing crypto has done is it's given us all incredible identity tools. We all have a wallet, and what a wallet is the ability to sign things and say this is mine. I made this. This is me. And I don't have to go sign up for PayPal. I don't have to go get a Gmail and like put my phone number in. And so that now we can give these agents identities. And they can prove that they are themselves and they can interact without having to sign up for anything. And the limiting factor right now on agents is that all these APIs are so walled. It's like every time I want to add a new connection, I have to go figure out like what's this SDK, what's the login, what's the credentials, and the agent has no way of getting those credentials. And so on crypto, it's like if you want something, you just permissionlessly pay for it and get it, and that makes everything like 1,000 times easier. And so I think the bridge from like video games and agents managing virtual currencies to crypto and real finance is very thin. Like you could, you could very much cross that bridge. And so yeah, it all makes a lot of sense to me. Now, I think a lot of the things that people are pointing to, like agents that trade your money, and it's coming, but it's early days, and I think that like the uptime and reliability of the stuff is just not there to warrant it. I think we still got to play on the edges where like the low reliability and lower uptime is fine, entertainment and games and etc. But obviously we can see where this is going in the future, and like I would say that 99.99999 all the nines out of cryptocurrencies ever in the future of humanity will be traded by AI, not by humans. You know, like at some point this becomes entirely algorithmic. And it'd be great. What if you're just like, hey, how much money do I have? Oh, you have enough. Do I need to make more? No, you're good. You're good. You just chill. Can I take a vacation? Yeah, totally. You don't even have to like ever look at your bank account. You know what I mean? That'd be a cool world. We're like, hey man, you're running low on money. You gotta work. You gotta go get a job. I don't know. Well, there's no job, so we'll see.
That's crazy. Crazy to even think about that. I think we'll take one more question before we wrap this up for today. But I promise I will definitely do a part two because we planned a lot more questions, but I think there's a limitation for time and there's only so much information humans can digest at one time. AI is different, it can take in a lot more information at once. But the last question for you today is how do you see the world in the next 5 years? Where do you think will we be?
Whoa. So this thing about exponential curves, which is that they grow really fast, but kind of like there's this like really slow beginning part. And so I think the mistake that I as an engineer and a lot of us make is like linear, that it's linear. That it's just gonna be like, oh yeah, we're just progressing and progressing and progressing. And it's more like technologies are like backwater, random, nobody gets it, nobody cares, super nerd stuff. Like think about crypto, like cryptography and like everything. And then one person lands that one thing that like unlocks it. And in crypto is obviously it's the solving of double spending with proof of work. And in AI, it's definitely like the transformer, right? And it's like once it unlocks, then it just like explodes. And then that like creates this kind of Cambrian explosion where like if there's another unlock, then that explodes. Um, and so like it really depends on like in AI, it's really going to come down to like, is there an Einstein like figure who figures out reinforcement learning basically like, oh, the AIs can learn now, or oh, they can actually start to like build on their research and like just do their own. And it's really hard to tell when. And so like if I look at it, it's like in 10 years we could be 1,000 times farther along than we are in 5 years because the exponential is so intense. And in 5 years, we might just be way too early. And I was in VR and I've been in a lot of these like immersion tech where you really, really like unpack everything. You're like, are people gonna put this on their face? I don't know. And he said, but Apple's gonna come in and put $1 trillion into it. It's gotta work. And it's like, but is it? And I was like, if you really, really unpack the variables, I think that there's some complexity there. And I think in AI, it's kind of the same thing where like the complexity is actually, it's definitely way, way more amenable. Like it doesn't have this like that limitation. The limitation on AI is that it consumes an extreme amount of electricity, like extreme. And in order for us to support the levels of expectation that we have of AI going forward, we have to move basically directly into nuclear power. And like Microsoft is investing heavily, and Google is investing heavily into these into power, because they see that as not number of GPUs now, but just the electricity in the grid to even support a data center with 100,000 GPUs in it. They have it's not money. Like they have more money than they can spend. They have more of every resource except for just pure electricity. And so I think this becomes a real S curve though. Like this becomes a real limiting factor on AI progress until we can figure out how to massively scale up the amount of electricity we can deliver into like really small localized regions, like a data center in Oregon or something. We have this problem. So I think that things are going to move along in a way that feels very fast, but is also extremely constrained by until we can figure out how to make smart models that run like on your MacBook but learn and are really smart. And can train, like you could train on your MacBook. Like we are really constrained by I think how fast this stuff can go. So my overall, like tech prediction is that in some ways it'll be incredibly impressive, and in 5 years it's like, wow, this is so like the products will be so polished, the agents will like, everyone's really cooked. But in other ways it's still just not the super intelligent thing. I think we're way farther from the AGI that we imagine, because it requires like a new plateau in energy consumption that we just like, it's not even an AI problem. It's like a much more holistic problem at that point. And that's my take, but I also don't know. However, I'd say we're always more optimistic. And like, even if we say like 50 years, this is inevitable, but it might only happen at the 49th year because of the way that exponentials work. And humans are famously bad at judging time on things because of the way that these exponential growth things happen.
Absolutely. We should have had the flying cars by now, but we don't,
Oh, and we
unfortunately.
do. It's just they're loud and annoying and like hard to park and FAA regulations. I think
Yeah,
that physical reality of like if you unpack the thing, you're like, oh
right.
god, yeah, like where are we gonna
Very
put
true.
all the GPUs? We gotta connect them all. Like where we get the electricity? We gotta build a nuclear power plant just to get the next generation of AI. Like literally, you know. So that's where we're going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally. Totally. Quite interesting. it's been an amazing conversation. Thanks for making time for this, Shaw. And do let our listeners know where can they get more details about what you're building, ElizaOS, and where can they learn more.
Yeah. ElizaOS.ai is our website. We have github.com/ElizaOS is our open source project if you want to get started. Go to YouTube, type in ElizaOS tutorial, and there's a bunch of stuff there. We have a community on Discord, discord.gg/AI16z, although we'll move that to ElizaOS soon. And we really want to help. I really want to help people like get into this stuff. And I think if you're like, what do I do with my life? Like, just become a builder, build things. It doesn't really matter, but like the tools will help you build faster, and hopefully we're one of the ways to get into that and do that. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks for doing this. And I wish you happy building.
Thank you much. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care.